Okay, I think we can get started, and my colleague Mercy will let the others in as they join. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on the part of the world you're joining us from. Thank you so much for making the time to join us again today for our fourth session in our COP on strengthening support for children with learning differences. Today, we are going to talk about differentiated instruction and inclusive pedagogy in low resource classrooms. This session will be recorded. To begin with and to get to know each other a little bit better, we would really love it if you could drop in your name, your organization, what part of the world you're joining us from, and tell us how you're feeling today on a GOAT scale. Last time we had the Elmo scale. Elmo looked way too happy in all of the 9 scenarios. I'm hoping the GOAT scale has more range and is able to capture your thoughts better. So as I move ahead, please do keep telling us how you feel and where you're from. Couple of guidelines for this community of practice. This is a safe space to share your opinions and experiences. Please raise your hand or use virtual reactions to engage. We'd love your full attention if possible. Please switch off from other tasks and notifications on your laptop for the duration of this meeting. And of course, if possible, do keep your camera on. It would be lovely to see your faces as well. Please feel free to engage with each other, ask questions freely, build on each other's ideas. We appreciate all of your comments and thoughts that you put on the chat. Please be open and also do share your contact information if you want to continue the collaboration. Today, we are very lucky. Okay, I'm just checking a couple of lovely. I see Sarah feels like a 4. I get it. Same here. Who else do we? Amrita feels like a 2. Oh, that's nice. I think that goes thinking. Kaze also feels like a 2. That's lovely. Rasti feels like a 6. Yeah, I think all of us can relate. Okay, moving on. Please do keep putting that in. These are really interesting responses. I would like to thank our peers who have joined us from Digital Promise and Luminos Fund. From Digital Promise, we have Barbara, who's the Senior Director of Learner Variability Project at Digital Promise, and Neha Raheel, who's the Director of Teaching and Learning at the Luminos Fund. In the next 90 minutes, we are going to learn more about the strategies for inclusive education and see how you can apply them in your respective contexts. As I was mentioning the last time, we have taken your feedback to include more time to get to know each other, to have more peer discussions in smaller groups. Again, I completely understand that not everyone may be comfortable with smaller group discussions, but even if you do not wish to contribute, it would be great if you could stay on and you could listen to your peers, encourage them, and engage with them where possible. I'm going to begin by quickly introducing GSF and why we are here today about the Learning Differences COP and the scoping study, following which we will do a quick icebreaker where we will get to know each other a little bit better. Post which, I will request Digital Promise and Luminos to tell us about their respective strategies and programs. We can then have a quick 10-minute break for the question and answers that you have for the organizations. After which, we are going to go into a peer learning session where we are going to be learning from the strategies that you will hear about today. And you will see how you can implement those strategies in your own respective context. Towards the end, we are going to do a quick whole group reflection, and we really want to hear from you what you need from us and how we can support you better. We'll end it with a closing and the poll. Please do fill the poll because that's really helpful for us, and we have taken your feedback in the past sessions and tried to make this session better for you. To tell you a little bit about GSF, for those of you who may have joined us for the first time, Global Schools Forum is a collaborative community, an innovation accelerator, and a partnership builder for non-state organizations working to improve education at scale for underserved children in low and middle income countries. Since our establishment in 2017, GSF has grown the community to 174 organizations spanning 71 countries, collectively running or supporting 1.3 million schools and centers, and providing education to more than 133 million children. The organization in GSF's community are standalone schools, a diverse set of school networks, and ECD centers, and organizations providing core support services to non-state schools and to government education systems. To tell you a little bit about the learning differences work that we are doing with Oak Foundation, Some of you are working with children with learning differences, which is also referred to as learning disabilities. 9 in 10 children with disabilities under the age 5 live in low and middle income countries. Yet many education systems in these countries struggle to provide quality support. We know there are many organizations working to support children with learning differences, but there's still so much to learn about the approaches being used and the challenges faced. And that is why we have a two-part objective. One, we want to identify the priorities, needs, and challenges of education organizations and LMICs who are supporting children with learning differences. And two, we want to explore how GSF can better support you in your work. Based on what we have heard from the community, we put together a 5-part community of practice on learning differences. In the first 3 sessions, we spoke about culturally relevant screening and diagnosis tools. We then spoke about teacher capacity building and classroom support. And in our last session, we spoke about inclusive curriculum and adaptive assessment strategies. Today, with Digital Promise and Luminos Fund, we are going to talk about the differentiated instruction and inclusive pedagogy in low resource classrooms. And in August, in our last session, we are going to talk about engaging caregivers and communities to reduce stigma and support inclusive learning. A very quick brief, my colleague will also drop the links to the sessions previously, and I will also share it over email. But very quickly to talk about what CAST and Building Tomorrow spoke about in our last session. Essentially, the key takeaways from it were designed for variability and not the average, which means you need to plan for diverse learner needs from the start using principles such as the UDL principles, and flexibility is key. Secondly, we spoke about how adapting curriculum is important and not replacing it. Make existing lessons more inclusive by connecting them to students' lives and context. Third, use of assessment to guide learning. Simple tools like checklists and individual learner plans help track progress and shift focus from deficits to strengths. And lastly, let data and reflection lead. Use regular reflection and peer support to adapt teaching and embed inclusive practices. You can also please go and refer to the links that Mercy would have dropped in the chat. Now coming to our icebreaker, we just want to understand a little bit from you about your contest, about what you are using in your current programs. If I could just request all of you to either scan the QR code or Mercy will be dropping the links and the code. There is a direct link, or if you could go to menti.com and drop in the code that Mercy is going to drop in the chat. I'm just going to quickly switch over to the Menti screen. Is anyone having any trouble joining? Please let me know. All good. If you could just drop a thumbs up or drop it in the chat. Okay. I think we are good. Is the first question up on your screen?
Yes, it's up.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, it's lost now. Maybe you can do it again.
Do I need to refresh? Sorry.
Tejaswini and Mercy, I see the third question, but it could just be on my end. I don't see the first question.
Just give me a second. Let me just try and reshare. Just give me a second. What do you see now? Okay, I can see answers coming in, so I'm guessing people are able to view it. Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, I see that 13 people have managed to join. If anyone's facing any trouble, please just let Mercy know. 3 people are using Phonics. We have 1 for learner variability navigator, 2 for differentiated instruction. None yet. More for differentiated instruction. For phonics. Any others, if you have, please do feel free to choose others and then tell us what it is that you're using. I think that's everyone. So 4 for differentiated instruction, and we will talk about what is it that you're using in your context. I'll move on to the next question. In my context, the hardest part of inclusive instruction is. Anything else? Teacher trainings, okay. Modifying curriculum, developing teacher capacity, lack of awareness, mindset change, lots of competing priorities, teacher materials in inclusive classrooms, low learning overall, competing priorities. For those of you saying competing priorities, would anyone want to unmute and explain what kind of priorities? Or you can also feel free to drop it in the chat. Teaching materials in rural areas.
I said competing priorities, but I said that from an angle of there's so much that needs to be done and so much at the baseline. So when learning levels are so low overall, when children are struggling, when teacher capacity is limited, resources are limited, everything, it's so hard to put together the best approach.
Prioritize, that makes sense. Capacity building of care workers on inclusive instruction. Thank you. I think there's a lot of teacher development, teaching material, and I think it's very aligned with the findings that we are also finding as a part of our scoping study. The mindset of teachers, it's not been easy to sensitize, train, and help them to grasp the concepts. Teacher attitudes and training. I'm just moving to the next question. The small change that made a big difference in our classroom was, I already see a lot of answers: independence, empathy, care, digital tools, freedom, referrals. I believe you can drop in more than one answer here. So if you wish to drop in more, please feel free to do that. Autonomy. Awareness, support, empathy. Books, that's nice. Bit different. Playful pedagogies. Phonics. I think we are right on track with session then. And for the last question, If you have any pedagogical approaches that your organization is using to support struggling learners, please do drop that in. Play-based learning, play-based pedagogy. We have also put together an Airtable where we are collecting the tools and strategies in one place for inclusive education. We'll be sharing it with you towards the end of the session. Please do drop in the tools that are shareable, and we'll be able to share it with the community. Books and reading activities are tailored to various reading levels, guided reading, peer learning. Thank you, everyone. This is great. And I hope, I do think from your answers, we are on the right track with this session, and you will be able to dive a little bit more into some of these. I will now stop sharing and I will hand over to Barbara. I know we said, sorry, the slide said Luminos first, but I think we go with Barbara. Would you like to start sharing?
Sure. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
Yes. And I will share my screen. Let's see here. Here we go. First of all, I really want to thank you for inviting me here. It's such an honor. And I was hoping I could go after Luminos because I absolutely love the work that they're doing, particularly in phonics. So I'll just say this before they even get on. I have two children with dyslexia and phonics, which is very research-based, really supported their work. So, but let me talk to you today a little bit about learner variability and the whole child approach. And looking at what you all talked about here in the Menti board, there is a lot of relevance. So first of all, a little bit about what is learner variability, where our concept here is based on the book by Todd Rose called The End of Average. And there he basically says that when you teach in a classroom, if you're teaching to the middle, you're really not teaching anyone. This is not just students with learning differences, but it really is anyone. So how do you personalize that learning? We say it's through understanding learner variability, which, by the way, undergirds UDL. I love presenting with the UDL folks because we have so much in common. There's so much synergy. So the way to understand learner variability is this iconic iceberg image. When you're a teacher, I used to teach very long ago, but what you see in the classroom, you typically see just the tip of the iceberg. You might see a child who's exhausted, who's acting up, who's giggling, who's just sleeping through the class, but you don't really know why. What understanding learner variability is through the lens of the whole child. This allows you to see the why behind the behavior, and that's what lets you personalize or differentiate your instruction. Once you know why they are the way they are. It's sort of like, I'm going to go to another slide here, but it's a little like those goats. How do you feel? It's now 6:19 where I am, so I was the tired goat, and hopefully won't be stammering my way through here. But so learner variability, I defined it in this paper I wrote, but basically it's the recognition that each student has a unique set of strengths and challenges across a whole child framework that we're going to show you very soon. And they're interconnected and they vary according to context. From the paper, the line that most people resonate with, and I think really with this group here, is when you understand learner variability, you see a design challenge, not a student problem. And that refers to when some of you said that mindset shift that teachers need. It can be a barrier to trying to do inclusive education, but that's the goal here with our Learner Variability Project, is to have you see that it's a design challenge. It's not, the onus should not be on the students. So here is why learner variability for learning differences. There's a number of reasons why. First of all, it is very essential to effectively teach anyone, but especially students with learning differences, because as I said before, it shifts the focus from quote unquote, what's wrong with the learner, to what does this learner need to thrive? And here's how the understanding supports more inclusive and effective instruction. In short, learner variability empowers educators to create classrooms where all students, including those with learning differences, can access meaningful, personalized, differentiated learning experiences. And why does it do this? Because it recognizes every learner's uniqueness. It promotes strength-based teaching. It supports flexible instructional design. It informs targeted and inclusive intervention that can personalize learning. And in the center of all of this, it builds student confidence and creates a sense of belonging for them in that classroom. Now, I'm curious, and I don't know if I can see the chat. Has anyone, have you heard of the concept of whole child? Somebody tell me if you can look, just go in the chat, like thumbs up, thumbs down. Is whole child a concept that is used in your schools? And like I said, I can't see the chat. I want to, I'm sorry.
Thumbs up. There's one thumbs up from Biniam.
Oh, okay, great. The principles of equitable whole child design and I think you get these slides. You can look at the publication that it came from. But whole child, it rests on building positive relationships, safe environments filled with belonging, and a lot of research out there. When you ask students what's the key factor for belonging, and one of them is that they're in a safe environment, physically and intellectually. Rich learning experiences and knowledge development. So how do you provide access to students with learning differences so that they can have robust learning experiences? Development of skills, habit, and mindsets. So there's that growth mindset for students to understand that they can grow and learn, and a very integrated support system. Let's see here. Once again, for learning differences, it focuses on whole child learning, focuses on, I told you I'm early, so this is going to come up a little later too, focuses on strengths, individualized learning, looking at the whole child supports social and emotional development. And these are things like, can you collaborate? Can you regulate your emotions in school? A growth mindset, inclusive and safe learning environments, multiple learning modalities. There is a lot of talk about learning styles. That is actually not supported by the research, but multiple learning modalities is. And because, as we said before, in defining learner variability, things can change in context. And so that's why it's important to see what works in different environments, physical and mental well-being, and it encourages collaboration between educators, families, and communities when you're talking about the whole child, because that also brings in the culture. So if you are comfortable with this, when we do professional learning, we always start on learner variability. We start with the self. So teachers see what this means for you. And this is sort of like the GOAT exercise we did very early on. If you're comfortable, please share in the chat one thing about who you are as a learner today that might impact your engagement in this call. And what it does with adults is it helps them understand that the same thing is happening with children when you come to school. If you had a bad morning or if you're up too early, you didn't get enough sleep, that has an impact on you. And there's all research that backs that up, that we, in developing the concept of learner variability at Digital Promise, we use the work of Mary Helen Imerdino Yang, and she talks about the impact of emotions on learning. So here's, once again, I can't see the chat, and it's okay if you didn't put anything in, but what I'll say is that for me, I mean, because we started so early today, so I am a little bit tired. I can tell I'm stammering a little bit more than usual, and that if I were in a class with a teacher, they might want to understand why I might not be as fluent as I would be, you know, like some hours from now. So. And then you also want to, we also talk about strengths as well as challenges. So the lack of sleep is a little bit of a barrier, but also, I'll be honest, the more stable kind of feeling here that I get is a sense of belonging in this community of people who are interested in working in the neurodiverse and the learning differences community. And so that energizes me to be here. So you can see the different impacts on that. So what is the Learner Variability Navigator? I know not many of you have seen it. It is a free and open source web app, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you in a second. It's a tool that synthesizes the science of learning research around the whole learner, and we're going to see that in a second, into an actionable model to inform pedagogy. It is not pedagogy, but it can inform the design of your classroom. It can create that easy path to personalize the learning experience for all learners, but especially critical for students who have learning differences. I'm going to show you how we build these models. When we talk about, let me put this, well, I guess that's okay. When we say we're research-based, we mean we're research-based. And this is how each of our learner models is developed. We have learner models pre-K to grade 12 in literacy, math, and portrait of a learner, excuse me, which is 21st century skills. And we're going to dive into that in a second. But we first consult with research experts in that area, in the grade level and also in the content area. They do multiple literature reviews. We then create what's called a learner factor map, and I'm going to show that to you. Then we collaborate with practitioners and there's literature reviews there as well. And we create what our teachers call the goodie bag. It's research-based strategies. So let's go over here and I'm going to open it up. Let's make sure this works. And so hold on. So this is the Learner Variability Navigator, what you would see if you went into this. These are the models, learner models I talked about: math, literacy, portrait of a learner. We also have an adult learner model, pre-K through grade 12. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into literacy 4-6. And this is what we call our whole child framework. You see the different columns. Language and literacy, we would call that column domain-specific content because it changes in the math area and then portrait of a learner. Then you see cognition, and these are the usual suspects. Whoops, let me move that off for a second. From attention to working memory. We have social and emotional learning, and this includes things like motivation, self-regulation, sense of belonging, stereotype threat, social awareness and relationship skills. And learner background. Are you living in adverse experiences? Do you feel a sense of safety? What socioeconomic status, sleep? And as we said with our definition of learner variability, these all interact with each other. And it's that interaction that will help you personalize this instruction. And let me show you what I mean. So say you have a student who, and this is an early morning class, and they're not able to retain much, excuse me, their working memory is weak, and you don't know why. A teacher comes in and they're just not sure. So you can hover over working memory and see the other factors that research says have an impact on working memory. On one side, in the language and literacy column, you'll see phonological processing. So that could be an indicator of dyslexia or some struggle with reading, right? On the other hand, you can see sleep. So you know, if you think it's phonological processing, you might want to test for dyslexia, or provide a phonics program, which actually I think, works for every kid. We all run into words we don't know. It's especially critical for students who are struggling to learn to read. But also, that this wonderful student, and let's just say it's a fourth grade student, they have a single mom, amazing person, works the night shift. So this young person has to get younger siblings up and out in the morning, and they're just tired. Sleep has an impact on working memory. And so how would you personalize that in the classroom? You might not want to pepper that child with questions at 7, 8 a.m. or whatever the first class is. You might want to adjust. Remember, we're talking about how do you redesign a classroom to personalize and differentiate instruction. You might not want to pepper them with questions then. Do it later, have a worksheet where they can do it later, or a conference with them. So that's just one example. And you can do this with anything. Metacognition is, do you understand what you're reading while you're reading? You can see different things that connects with attention being one of them. So sorry. I'm going to go into working memory now. This is one of our factors. And what we have here then, I gave one presentation and somebody said, what is working memory? That's okay if you haven't heard that term before. We give a one-page PD on each of our factors. So it explains in detail what is working memory and why it matters. And then just to show you, when we say research-based, we mean research-based. We include the citations of all of the work that we're putting together here. So you can write a dissertation on it, or you can, hang on, let's see here. Or, do a grant proposal. Here. I have to move that over, go back over to here. And then what we have under each of our factors is what teachers call the goodie bag. And these are strategies that address working memory. And you can also see up here, for example, for working memory, what relates to it. Here's sleep. You can see these are all of the connecting factors. The amount of sleep, and especially the quality of sleep that a student receives, is important for working memory processes to operate accurately and efficiently. So these, once again, these are all these connecting factors that help personalize or differentiate instruction. So now what I want to do is show you, and hang on one second here. I want to go into one of my favorite strategies for students who do have learning differences, and very much, my son is an adult now, but very much worked for him his fourth grade teacher did this collaborative writing. So with each of our strategies, we give you a little write-up about what it is. In some cases, we have a video of how it's used in the classroom as well. We also work with EdTech products, and we explain to them how you can design this strategy into their EdTech product. The reason why I picked collaborative writing here, and you can see it can improve students' foundational writing skills, vocabulary, syntax, verbal reasoning. These are all interrelated. And collaborative writing, the way it worked in this, that I saw in this class and hearing from other teachers, is you bring students together. If you have a student with dyslexia or dysgraphia, but they have great ideas, but they can't get them down fast enough. So you get a group of students together, and here's the ideas person, right? They have wonderful ideas. Here's the person who will check for spelling. There's some students who are very, very good in spelling. Here's the student who will type it or write it up because they're more facile with typing and writing. But you bring them all together, and that is another way to differentiate and personalize that instruction. They're going to come out with one product, and they all pitched in given their strengths, and their any challenges were mitigated by bringing this group of people together. It was a wonderful learning experience that I was able to see firsthand. I think I'm also going to show you, I'm trying to look at my time here. I'm going to go back into the factors. I want to talk a little bit about the sense of belonging, because you all mentioned in that the little questions that you answered, empathy, which came up. And empathy is, and this is research shows, especially with kids with learning differences, is such an important aspect to have, for teachers to have. And it does help change mindsets, but it also helps teachers just respect who these people are and make sure that they're included in the classroom. So we have, once again, this is the factor of belonging. It's closely tied to social supports. We have a whole lot in here, identity development. I'm not going to go through all of this right now. Once again, we also have the references. But here in the strategies, if I can find this quickly enough, and I might have to, here we go. Let me find, we have, okay, if anybody can skim faster than me, there are a couple in here on empathy, and I'm not seeing them right now. I want to open it up. It's called Empathy Interviews. Give me a second. I'll go through this a little bit easier. There's collaborative writing again, which also helps. You know what? While I'm looking for empathy, I'm going to also show you one on respectful redirection. Once again, it also helps with personalizing that instruction and working on a student's strength, and that can help mitigate challenges. Respectful redirection is, or error correction, is a way to handle errors so that children don't feel so afraid to make a mistake. And by doing that, that also helps create that sense of belonging, to start out that it's totally fine to make an error. Let's go back, let's look at it. Here's how it's used in a classroom with little ones, how you can design it into your product. So this is one that teachers that I've presented to are very fond of. I'm still trying to find empathy. What we do have in here, I can talk to you about it without, is empathy interviews. And what the strategy does is it helps, oh my gosh, hold on. This is the early morning and I'm not able to move as fast as I would like to do. Anyway, it is in here. Empathy interviews, where the strategy helps guide teachers to actually give that interview to students, so that the student there builds a relationship with the student, so that they realize that empathy bond with the student. Another one similar to that, though, is the growth mindset feedback. And this is also that would help create that sense of belonging. This is these strategies are important for every student. Let's, state that up front. But it is especially critical for students who are struggling for whatever reason to learn in the classroom. Because the opposite of belonging here is alienation and dropping out and not being interested. So I think that's where I want to go with this. Let me try to get back into the slide deck. I'm going to admit that I just admitted somebody here. Oops. If anybody wants to look at any other age level, if you want to put it into the chat and somebody can shout it out to me, I'm glad to go in and look at any of the other factors. I'm going to open this up one more time just so you can see it. Is there any interest? Go ahead.
If you could drop it in the chat, that would be useful, and also just a quick time check. But also, if you could drop it in the chat, and we can share it with everyone.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna go back and finish it. Thank you for the time check. I appreciate that. Let me just go down to this. You'll get the slides. This is one way to use our strategies to create an inclusive environment, creating a culture of error. That was a big one, and we were talking a little bit about it before. I also want to talk just a bit about 21st century skills. That was the last column. This is from the World Economic Forum. The future of education lies in empowering young learners to embrace and develop their uniquely human qualities. And that's all about their learner variability, those unlikely to ever be replaced by technology. This is the World Economic Forum taxonomy, and this from our learner variability navigator is the portrait of a learner column. And these are some of these factors of learning that are important in this case for everybody. The only other thing I did want to show you is that in this guidebook, and I'll put that in the chat as well, it's how do you teach students about their own learner variability. We also have a poster for that. And here we have some examples from the classroom. What this one teacher did with young students is compare and contrast plants and flowers. They're all different. And then what they did, but also the older children did, is they built their own, they created their own character. And they did things like the body. I like to learn by myself. That was a green body. I learn better with a partner. I learn better in a group. And this is helping students understand their own learner variability and that we all are different. We all have differences, strengths, and challenges. I am going to end there. We have some take-home ideas. I'll put everything else in the chat. Sorry for going over time there.
That's completely
Thank
fine.
you all.
Thanks so much, Barbara. And we have put the links in, so please do take a look at the Learner Variability Navigator. I'm sure there'll be many questions that you'll have, and Barbara is available for us to answer those questions. I will hand it now over to Neha to walk us through the work that Luminos is doing.
Great, thank you. Can you see my slides? Yes, excellent. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to Barbara for this wonderful presentation and to GSF for inviting us. My name is Neha Raheel, and as Tejaswini mentioned, I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning at Luminos. I'll talk to you about a couple of things today. We'll start by setting the stage very quickly about the global learning crisis, a little bit about what Luminos does, and then we'll go into how children learn to read, the importance of phonics, and we'll end with a couple of strategies that we use in our classrooms related to phonics. So if at any point, of course, if you have thoughts, comments, questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat and we will keep check on that. All right, so just to start, this is the context where we work. The contexts where we work are extremely low learning levels. So the global state of education is that there are 82 million primary school age children who are out of school. And 92% of children in low-income countries cannot read by age 10, or what is known as the learning poverty statistic. What does this mean? This means that 1 in 5 children are out of school in sub-Saharan Africa and 1 in 3 in West Africa. And what are some of the reasons behind why children are out of school? Some of these you might be deeply familiar with, but just to show you quickly, there's poverty, there's low learning levels within school, child labor, orphanhood, refugee status, and of course, learning differences, which is what we're talking about today. And also just to show you this quick graphic, this is, and all of this at the end will show you what it would mean for all of the children who are 10-year-olds in sub-Saharan Africa. So 20% are currently out of school, 70% are in school but not learning, and the remaining 10% are in school and learning. So that means 1 in every 10 child is in school and learning. And that is the context within which we operate, where overall across the board, learning levels are so extremely low that we have to contextualize and talk about that when we're also talking about learning differences or children who are struggling. Very quickly, just a little bit about Luminos. Luminos was founded in 2016, and we work with children from low-income contexts who have either dropped out of school or have never enrolled in school, and they're typically the first generation to attend school. We provide them with a catch-up learning program and allow them to catch up to grade level, and eventually we integrate into government school systems or mainstream schooling, and of course, to prepare them for lifelong learning using foundational learning. And to date, we have provided second chance education to over 370,000 students in the 5 countries that you can see on the map there. All right, so that ends my quick spiel. Let's now look at how do exactly children learn to read. And I'm going to preface this by saying my mother tongue is Urdu, so anybody who speaks Urdu, you're not allowed to answer on the next slide. All right, can anybody who, like I said, doesn't speak Urdu, can you try to read this word? I can see a couple of no's. Of course you can't, because these are just symbols for you. So if you don't know the letter sounds, you probably cannot read this word. But now let's try reading it together. That first symbol you see is H. The second symbol is O. And the last symbol is Na. So if we blend that together, we get Ho Na. Now you can read this word, but do you know what it means? Yes.
Why you start?
Does anybody
Why is
who,
that
once again,
backwards? It's how they write it.
Sorry?
I'm asking why you start backwards when you spell it.
Why you start
not sure.
backwards? That's how the
Oh,
script
okay.
is written. Urdu
That is,
goes
yes.
the other
Thank
way.
you,
You
Tejaswini.
started-
Arabic
you
and
started
Urdu
with-
go from right to left. That is why, that's
Okay.
where we start from. All right.
Okay.
So now that you've read this word, do you know what it means if you don't know Urdu? Once again, couple of no's there. All right, of course you don't know what it means because you don't know the spoken language, which means you probably don't know what this word means. But I can tell you, Hona is an Urdu word, which means to be. And that first experience with me showing you a script, which you didn't even know which side to start reading from, this is what it feels like for a child who cannot read. You give them text in front of them and they don't know what to do with that. And then when they don't know what to do with that, and we're constantly trying to get them to do something with it without giving them the tools, that's when doubt, lack of self-confidence, esteem issues, all of those things also, and just general anxiety related to schooling and learning sets in. So what does this show us? This shows us that the ultimate aim, which most frameworks in the world will tell you, is reading comprehension. But how do you get to reading comprehension, or how do you get to reading with meaning? There's 2 things that you need: decoding or word recognition, and understanding of the language or spoken language comprehension. And this essentially is what the simple view of reading is, which is a very simple framework that tells us that there is a relationship between these 2 factors, and that the relationship is multiplicative. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, if either decoding or understanding of the language is 0, reading comprehension will be 0. And so what it also tells us is that if one of our students is struggling to read and more broadly struggling to learn, the problem is typically either that they don't have a firm basis in decoding, or that they're struggling to understand the language in the texts that they are being given to read. And so given that, what exactly is our approach in literacy, and how do we use that? How do we ground it in what evidence says from the science of reading? But before I do that, if you can, please drop in the chat what word or what thing comes to your mind when you hear the word phonics. And I'm sure some of you might already be familiar with it, but just to get a temperature check of what you think phonics is. Sounds of letters, I can see. Great, sound. Sounds and letters. Decoding, blending, sound. Okay, excellent, all on the right track. And keep putting your thoughts in the chat as well, please. So phonics actually is a part of our comprehensive approach to literacy instruction. We haven't created this approach. This is what the science of reading tells us, that there are 5 components of effective reading instruction, which include phonemic phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And any successful early grade reading program or foundational literacy program should ideally include all 5 of these components, sequenced and scoped out in a way that makes sense for learners. All right, so today, like I said, we're diving deeper into phonics. But before that, let's look at quickly, why is phonics-based instruction even important? Is it just a buzzword that people use, or does it actually have some basis in evidence? So the first thing that I'll say is, of course, it is an evidence-backed method. There are a lot of meta-analyses and major reviews, such as the National Reading Panel, the National Research Council, that confirm that systematic and explicit phonics instruction significantly improve word reading, spelling, fluency, comprehension, and that they outperform less structured methods. The other thing to note here is students with dyslexia, and I think Barbara has mentioned this as well, students with learning differences, especially dyslexia and other learning challenges, they benefit and respond particularly well to phonics-based instruction, especially when multiple learning modalities or multisensory techniques are integrated into that learning. And we'll look at a little bit what that looks like through the strategies. But why does this matter for reading success? It matters because we empower children through phonics to learn how to decode rather than to rote memorize a couple of sight words here and there, and then to rely on that memory every time they're faced with a word, whether it's in the context that they learned it in or in a new context, which they just simply don't know. Automatic fluency and automaticity with decoding also frees up cognitive space for comprehension, and which is, like we've seen, which is crucial for overall literacy and the goal of reading with meaning. And lastly, also, it bridges early learning gaps. So it is especially useful for students who are from backgrounds that are at risk already, or they have limited oral vocabulary, or they're learning in a language which they don't speak, which is not their first language, second, or even sometimes third or fourth language. So just to sum up, phonics builds strong reading and writing skills, and it delivers meaningful learning outcomes for all children, but especially for children who have learning differences such as dyslexia, which means that it is a vital and crucial and absolutely not skippable part of any effective literacy program. All right, so we've been saying phonics. What exactly does phonics instruction look like in the early grades? The first thing to understand is, what does decoding mean? Decoding is also sometimes referred to as word recognition. So it's the ability to recognize words by using the knowledge that these are symbols that make sounds. So when you knew one of the letters made the sound h, that knowledge you could use to then read the rest of the word. And so essentially decoding is the process of figuring out the code in which a language is written on a piece of paper or in a text. And we need to work out what the sounds are that the letters represent, and then use that to blend them together. English is challenging, as one letter doesn't always represent the same sound, which is why when teaching English or languages similar to English, we first begin by teaching the simplest relationships between letters and sounds. So always move from simplicity to complexity. And only later on, when kids are comfortable with the simple sound to letter relationship, do you introduce uncommon spelling patterns or complex symbol sound relationships. And what I mean by that is, when you introduce the symbol A first, you introduce the sound A, like in the word ant. That's a lot easier than the other sounds that A makes in cake, in car, in any, in ball. So it's a lot easier to do the first, which is A for ant or A for apple. And within decoding, two of the strategies that we'll talk about today are you use segmenting and blending, and they help children get to the point where they're able to read and decode. And an example of what it means to decode is when you've learned the letter sounds and symbols m-atta, and you see the word mat written in front of you, you can easily say m-atta, mat, and you can read that word. And how do you read that word? You read it by blending. Blending is the ability to take those individual sounds and connect them. So it's one thing to learn that the letter M makes the sound m, and the letter A makes the sound a, and the letter T makes the sound t. But what do I do now? What do I do with that? I can just say m-atta. I haven't decoded yet. I have decoded when I can blend it to say m-atta, mat, which is the example that we've included here as well. And lastly, segmenting, which is the opposite of blending. It's the ability to divide words or break words into individual letter sounds, or if you're using languages where the syllable is the smallest unit of sound, then into syllable sounds. So an example here would be, if you take the word pin, say it out loud, kids can say p-i-n, pin. And so that's the opposite of saying pin, you first say pin and then you make them break it. So that's the relationship between segmenting and blending, and kids need loads of opportunities to practice both. All right, now if I can please request you to drop in a couple of examples from your context of phonics activities that you might have seen in action, whether related to decoding, blending, segmenting, any other phonological awareness activities, onset rhyme, anything like that. If you can drop those in the chat, that would be wonderful. And I can quickly give you a couple of minutes. Okay, sorry. The question is, have you seen any phonics activities in action in a classroom, either in your programs or from when you were a student in school?
Neha, maybe can we drop the question in the chat and you can go back to the previous slide so they can see the strategies that you shared?
Sure. Rusty, could you please add this question in the chat if you are around? And I can go back to the previous slide. Okay, and I can see flashcards, learning the alphabet, and then their sounds with an example word, using Legos with letters, blending and segmenting activities. All of those are true. The example here, which is the A sound with airplane, it's also reminding me of letter sounds and actions. Reading rhymes or reading poetry. All of these super, super important. Using your arm, excellent. George, I don't know if you've already seen some of my slides, and that's where you're getting this idea from. Yes, blending letter sounds to sound out different words. Reading arms, excellent strategies, all of them. All right. So now I'll quickly show you 3 different strategies that we use in our country programs, and I'll walk us through very quickly what they look like. So the first strategy is, you can see a picture here. This is one of our lovely students, Annie, who's demonstrating this phonics-based blending activity of using a blending ladder. And I'll show you exactly what a blending ladder looks like. So a blending ladder helps students practice seeing and hearing the individual sounds that make up short words, or what we sometimes call CVC words, which is a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. And that's usually what we start with because they're easiest to blend. So we provide students with time to practice blending the sounds of their letters using these blending ladders. And this is what a blending ladder will look like. So each week, our teacher writes a ladder with the vowels on each step and adds an initial consonant for the week. So you'll see here where you see word beginnings, the fa, fi, fo, fu, those are all our word beginnings. So then students copy these in their notebooks, and every day a different ending consonant is shared. So the first ending consonant is n. And students will write that next to the blending ladder, and then they will practice blending to sort of say f, a, n, fan, or fe, n, fen. And so sometimes, as you can see from here, they'll create real words, and sometimes they'll create silly words or nonsense words which don't have a meaning. For the real words, the teacher will share meanings. And for the silly words, the teacher will say, oh, this is just a silly word that is used for practice to read. Blending practice can be done using both real and silly words. And the important thing to note here is that learners need many opportunities to practice seeing a letter, saying its sound, and then blending the different sounds to read the actual word. So whether that's through silly words or through real words, in the beginning of instruction, it doesn't matter, both are equally important for blending practice. The second strategy you see here is one of our other wonderful learners is showing you 2 flashcards that they're holding up with 2 syllables. So the first syllable is ma and the second syllable is ba. And then they'll bring the syllables to the flashcards together to say ma, ba. and they would have read the word. You'll see other words on the board behind, poma, sima, nisu. And so all of those would be used for on flashcards to blend sounds to read word. What this does is you clearly take something and you show individual syllables or sound parts and how they can come together. So just the very act, the physical act of bringing those two flashcards together, that triggers some of the neural circuits as well and allows them to remember, okay, this is how you blend. It also encourages active decoding because you're holding and combining these flashcards and you're physically and mentally blending the sounds together. You're also reinforcing the relationship between the letters and the sounds, and you're also gradually increasing the complexity of the word. So here you can see 2-syllable words. Once they're through a couple of weeks of decoding instruction, we'll eventually get to 3-syllable words and so on and so forth. You can also very easily replicate this in small groups or in pairs where they can show each other different flashcards, make silly words, make real words, and use those to blend. And lastly, of course, it makes everything interactive and fun. I noticed a lot of people said play-based pedagogy and joy. And so how do you induce that into the classroom, especially for learners where we've heard the importance of multiple modalities. So this is moving, matching, combining cards, and using a very real tactile game, things you can touch in order to learn how to blend. And the last strategy I'll show you is this one, which is blending sound to read words. In the picture here, you'll see an example, which I believe Amrita shared in the chat, which is of blending arms. And then over on the side, you'll see what's an excerpt from our teacher guide and the student book associated with it. So what's really happening here? What's happening here is students are practicing identifying the individual sounds of the letter. Over here on your left, you'll see there's dots underneath each individual letter. So they'll say k, a, n, k, a, b, I. Then in the second section, they're moving to the syllable stage. So they'll say, okay, k, a, n, k, an, can, k, a, ka, b, I, b. And so they'll remain at that level. And in the last, they'll go into blend the whole. So they'll say kan, ka, bi, which is a word from Twi. And so essentially, this is an approach which we call Bobo Kabam Kenkan, which we use in our Ghana program. And it's basically reminding you to identify the letter sound, blend the letters together into syllables, and then read the word. And so again, this is an example of a multi-sensory approach where, which is, like we've heard today a lot, are really commonly recommended for students who are struggling with phonics, and especially for students who have learning differences. You can also, because if you are able to provide a learner book or a textbook, and you can have this little part at the bottom in that, what we ask or encourage learners to do is to point at each letter. So k, a, n, k, and then to use the swiping thing kind of action to say kan, ka, bi. And so that again is the relationship between the physical and the mental to reinforce a pattern that they're learning. All right. And just to kind of very quickly show you that this really does work. This is an approach which has been shown to work across various contexts, but just to give you an example from an RCT that we did in our Liberia program, Luminos kids at the end of the program, which is a 10-month program, were learning 34, or were able to read 34 correct words per minute, and the control group was only able to read 15. So various other kind of things on the left, you can see that 73% of our teachers stated that our graduates had better reading abilities. They're able to read and write better than their peers, and they're also staying in school and persisting beyond when they go into the government school programs. So just all of this to say that the approaches that we use, and phonics, which is not novel anymore at all, really is grounded in real-time data and really is shown through assessments that it works. And the last note that I wanted to end on was this. What does this mean for a wider inclusive approach, right? So phonics-based pedagogy should, of course, be used alongside a wider inclusive strategy to support learners, which we heard a little bit about from Barbara. I'm not going to go into too much what learning differences are, but essentially they encompass individuals who have specific learning disabilities like dyslexia or dyscalculia, but also those who have related neurological processing challenges like attention deficits, executive function challenges, and so on. So our approach essentially starts with the knowledge that all children need to learn in a low learning context. And what I showed you earlier, which is that 90% of children in the context where we work are not learning. They don't know how to read and they don't know how to do basic math. Which is why our first step actually is holistic learning, which is that in contexts where children are already learning so little and so few children know how to read, we need to provide effective instruction and supplement that with inclusive approaches. And the same approaches that work for children with learning differences are also approaches that work best for all children, including phonics. So effective instruction needs literacy through phonics, structured pedagogy, and gradual release of responsibility approaches. How do we supplement that with inclusivity? We focus on joyful learning. We create awareness on learning differences. We include caregivers and communities for support, and we effectively use infrastructure to promote inclusivity. And what that also means is what Barbara was talking about, there's requirement to shift from a fixed to a growth mindset, which is the biggest thing that I think we struggle with is not everybody agrees that every single child is capable of learning. And that's kind of our mantra at Luminos, because we work with the most marginalized children. We have to believe, and we of course do believe, that every single child everywhere is capable of learning. And so after we provide effective instruction, there will still be students who are struggling, who, whether or not they have learning differences or just have not grasped the content. So what do we do at this stage? We use real-time data and monitoring to identify students who are struggling with a particular concept, or even classrooms that are struggling and need additional support. We conduct research to understand what are the characteristics of these struggling learners in our context. Do they speak the language of instruction? Are there other variables? And then we've also tested a bunch of different tools, including EGRA, which is the early grade reading assessment, which we use every year. We also discussed whether facilitators are able to identify struggling learners, either qualitatively or through the weekly formative assessments, which we've built into our programs. We used a learning differences screener in Asante Twi in Ghana, and we also tried out rapid automatized naming tools. And all of that to say that the third step, which is that we support struggling learners. And how exactly do we do that? We children who've been identified as struggling on a particular topic, there are various approaches that we use to support these children, which are primarily whole class approaches as well as targeted additional support. So in contexts where we work, where classroom sizes are big, instructional time is limited, whole class approaches can be quite effective. And what we sometimes also do is targeted group remediation, which is the assessment scores is telling you these 5 students are struggling with the letter sounds that we taught this week. Let's provide some enrichment, independent work for the rest of the class and take these 5 students to the board and review or revisit what was taught. And just to kind of plug in, we've also worked on a white paper on this, and it should be coming out by the end of next year. I leave you with this last thing, which is a story, a beautiful story from our context. This is a child on your left, Mibratu. He lost both of his parents before his 2nd birthday, and his grandmother, who you see with him, Bafani, took him and his 4 siblings in. Mibratu briefly attended school, but he had to drop out to support his family by helping around the house. With 5 grandchildren to feed, Bafani couldn't afford to send him to school. Mibratu, who's now 10 years old, is thriving in a Luminos program. And his grandmother says, my grandchild has improved a lot. He can now read and write. He now wants to share what he knows with others. Mibratu's favorite subject is math. He loves adding and subtracting numbers, and he can now dream of a future where he continues to learn. And just to let you know, he wants to become a pilot because airplanes are absolutely fascinating for him. And just these are some resources which Tejaswini will be very kind to share with you as well. This is a part of our Luminos method, which dives deeper into phonics for first generation readers if you want to know more. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Neha. Thanks to both Neha and Barbara. I'm sure you have a ton of questions. Please do drop those in the chat. And I did see, I think, one question that came up on the difference between decoding and segmenting. George, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me, please? Yes, so I saw, I think I saw like I just see myself in the context what we are really doing, and in that clearly, very, very good about that. And we have also seen the result of phonics-based instruction, very quickly, when we started that, we realized that for sure, segmentation and blending could not work in certain words. I remember when I met a teacher teaching, the word TWO, and he wanted to blend that using the same segmentation, and there was trouble there. So maybe in our structured pedagogy, I will share your experience. There are some words we teach them as sight words when those that could not work with that segmentation and blending as well. We also realize that here in our context, we have up to 16 languages, and the languages have their own sound system. Myself speaking to you, my tribe, my language does not have R sound. Mostly when we have children in the classes where, because of their L1, it interferes with the learning of the L2, and same with teachers as well. So we struggle around that largely. No, but I think we try to manage that to really see how they can overcome some of those challenges as such. But phonics-based instruction, I quite agree, is one of the best things that can help, and that's what we are currently doing over the years to see, and we are seeing very good results. I like that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. That's really helpful to know. And I was just wondering, I think in the interest of time, we did want to do a breakout room now where we were hoping you could go in, talk to your peers, and see the three strategies that Neha presented, how you can implement it in your particular context. But before you go into that, if I could just launch this quick quiz for you all to answer. This is essentially, now that you know these strategies and some of you have been a part of our sessions right from the beginning, really wanted to go deep dive a little bit further into how we can support you better. And as Neha also put in the chat, even they are looking for ways to support as many children as possible. So what is it that you need from us and how can we help you better? Mercy, could I request you to just launch the quiz, please? If you could just take 5 minutes to fill that quiz in, and then we'll come back and go into the breakout, if that's okay. And please keep dropping in the questions in the meantime.
And Tejaswini, maybe we can use a couple of minutes in each breakout to answer any lingering questions. Then that
Yes.
way we can launch into discussion.
Yes, absolutely. We can take about 3 to 4 minutes to fill this quiz, and then we can go into send us into breakout rooms. But in the meantime, I'm just going to explain to you what we are hoping to do through these breakout rooms. Okay. Please let me know when my screen is visible. Yeah, I think it's up now. So essentially, we are going to send you, so Neha has explained several phonics strategies. And so using these strategies, we were hoping that we will send you into groups of 4 or 5. Mercy has put in the chat a sheet where you can go down to the table and put in your answers. If you could pick just one of these strategies that you think would work in your context, what adaptations to this strategy do you think you need to make for inclusive learners? And what challenges do you anticipate? And if you have any ideas to address them, please do put it in the note taker template. As George was also mentioning the challenges they have faced and how they have implemented it in their context. Similarly, how you would want to implement it in yours. I'm not sure how much time we'll have when we come back, but if you could just nominate one person to come back and talk about a key idea or strategy you found useful and a challenge you think that will come in place when you implement it. I will ask Mercy to send us into breakout rooms. We'll have Neha, Rasti, and Barbara in different rooms who will be moving around to help you if you're struggling with any of these strategies. Rasti has also dropped the link to the strategies in the chat. So please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. But the 3 strategies we are talking about are blending ladders using flashcards and blending sounds to read words. Before we send everyone into the rooms, Neha, Barbara, anything you want to say? Any questions anybody has? Okay, perfect. Mercy, I think we can go into breakout rooms, please.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
God bless you. Have a nice time.
You too. Are people coming back? Hi, how was it? How was your experience?
Great. It was exciting to hear about some of the different tools that different organizations are using as they're approaching this topic and set of skills.
Barbara, how was your room?
Oh, Barbara, I think
Are
you're
you
muted.
mute?
Hi, Victor was in my group who now he's here somewhere, more people are coming in, but we went off a little bit. It was a small group and I showed them some of the factors and strategies that related to what Luminos is talking about with like morphological awareness, orthographic, and how that can work. And Victor so kindly shared some experiences that he has had here. I also want to shout out Rosalind at AfricaDyslexia.org. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well, Barbara. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. We just chatted yesterday.
He's going to be our next presenter for the session on parental and community engagement in August.
Oh.
So that's a free keep. So welcome back, everyone. And if just as Barbara and Sarah were sharing, if there's any specific group that would want to unmute and tell us what you spoke about, I'm sure we have your responses and I'm happy to share those like last time. But if anything specifically stood out to you or any particular challenge or strategy you think was useful, if any of the groups would like to unmute and speak. And in parallel, again, sorry, in the interest of time, I'll just request Mercy to launch our final poll. Please fill that in as you also unmute and tell us what you have discussed in any of these rooms. Group 2, Group 3, Group 4, anybody, please feel free to unmute.
Josephine, please try launch on your side. When I try to launch, it brings the previous one.
I'll just do it.
Maybe I'll just share a little chat Rusty and I in our group we were having, and my question was to find out in their approach, which is a great approach they're using to support these learners they are supporting, but I wanted to find out how it has helped with their students. I wanted to first find out if maybe they have identified students with learning, so let's say dyslexia, if they've diagnosed them, but they are not into diagnostic yet. However, they have students also that like you could see the signs that have struggles with learning, and so I wanted to see how that has helped them, like the phonics approach has helped them to support to intervene for this student. And she gave a number that I think we have been always talking about it, and even was it yesterday we spoke about it in a meeting where I was challenging like the foundational learning approach, which is great for everybody. But I always say there's always that gap within all the programs because there are no programs that are specifically designed within them to support learners with dyslexia or related learning difference. And that's where the gap is, that we feel like, because maybe 90% or 85% are getting it. Okay, the program is solid, which is great. But then there's this number of students also that are being left behind. So we all it proves that we always have to know that when it comes to our learners with dyslexia and related learning differences, the approach and the different programs that we need to have and try and see which one works with them. Because even with 5 dyslexics, we are not the same. We are complex people. We are not the same. And so maybe Levante will work for me. Maybe Phonics will work for this person. Maybe OG will work, or Gillingham will work for somebody. Maybe a different approach like the Davis program. And so we have to kind of have them in mind, and we'll be able to support all of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosalind. And I think that would encompass a lot of what was discussed. And I think absolutely agree with you. We are at time. So if you have filled the poll, please feel free to drop off. I would just like to thank Barbara, Neha, and Rasti again for this wonderful session. And as I was also saying, this time we really got to deep dive into the tools and the strategies. And I think that was super useful. And I'm sure our community will agree. I'm going to send out the takeaways, and I'm going to send out all of the decks that you have seen today. Please, and also I will share the email IDs of everyone. So in case you want to get in touch with anyone further, please do. We are taking a 1-month break after this. We'll be back on August 6th with Rosalind, and we're going to talk with Africa Dyslexia Organization on the parental and community support and stigma reduction. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for all of those of you who've joined us right from the beginning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.